Okay. Well, great to be with you all here today. I'm going to present this workshop on best practices in term sheets for founders. As Marianne said, my name is Ellisha Blechynden. I'm a corporate attorney based out of San Francisco. I have a boutique corporate firm here, and we focus on startups, venture capital, and M&A. One of the main things we work on is equity financings, and the term sheets we're talking about today are the term sheets you have for equity financings. Okay, we're going to go over 4 areas in the presentation today. Firstly, I'm going to touch on the most common types of equity financings. There's a few different types that early stage companies use, so we'll go over those. I'm then going to talk about general term sheet provisions, the sort of provisions that are in all term sheets. I'm going to focus in on safes and preferred stock financings today. Most of the conversation will be about term sheets for preferred stock financings, but we'll talk about safes a little bit as well. Now, I also have in the chat, I'll put my contact information. Hopefully that will come through. While I'm going through, feel free to put questions in the chat. I'll try and answer them as we go along. Otherwise, I'll save them up for a Q&A at the end. Otherwise, I'll also say, if you have any questions and I don't answer them in today's presentation, of course, feel free to reach out to me, email, LinkedIn, what have you. All right, I'll jump in and get going. Take that chat down. Okay. There we are. All right. So I see in the chat we have some founders, we have some investors. That's great. I'm tailoring this speech mostly to founders, but of course it's incredibly relevant to investors as well. So if I say something and it sounds sort of too foundery perspective, feel free to drop a question in the chat to say, how would you frame that from an investor's point of view? Happy to answer from either perspective. I'll mostly focus on the founder's perspective in the presentation. Now, with that said, so for early stage venture-backed companies, the most common equity instruments that are used for financings are safes, convertible notes, and preferred stock. Safes you're probably all very familiar with. They are used very regularly. They're a great tool. They're quick. Most companies and investors are very comfortable with the Y Combinator forms that we use so regularly here in the Bay Area and across America. They're quite neutral. I say here they're founder friendly, but honestly, they're founder friendly and investor friendly. They're just a fairly neutral, very easy to use tool to raise money. They don't have interest rates. They don't have a maturity date, and safes will convert in the next preferred stock round. So the idea of them is that they're the right to get equity in the next preferred stock round. And because the investors are coming in early on the safe, they get a preferential pricing treatment for coming in as their benefit for coming in early. Minimal negotiations equals low legal fees, which we all know founders love that. So low legal fees. And mostly used for pre-seed and seed rounds. Not exclusively, but mostly. Convertible notes are also a popular tool for equity financing rounds. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about convertible notes today. If you have a specific question on a convertible note, of course, feel free to reach out to me. But just to talk about a bit up front here. So a convertible note acts as a loan and the right to convert to equity. It's sort of a dual instrument type of tool. It is generally considered to be investor friendly. It gives the investor the right to either have the loan repaid, i.e. they get their money back, or the right to convert into equity. Now, most investors, if they're going to ask for a convertible note, they're thinking they want to convert to equity. Otherwise, they just do a straight loan. But this tool gives them the option of going with the option to be repaid like a loan or to be converted to equity down the road. Like a loan, it has interest. Like a loan, it has a term. There's a maturity date. So 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. At that point in time, the note will usually include a term that says you either have to pay me back or force conversion at that time. Often convertible notes are extended. The maturity date will be extended for that reason. They generally, unlike safes that have the Y Combinator forms or preferred stock that has the NVCA forms, there's no sort of vanilla form of convertible notes. So they usually are more sort of bespoke drafting, specific negotiations. They are more complex than safes. They do get used quite regularly in bridge financing. And the reason for that is if your company is needing bridge financing, you're usually a little bit subject to the terms of the investors, and the investors will want a little bit more protection because you're potentially a risky bet. So they want that additional, rights to treat it as a loan or convert. And there's other terms in con notes that are helpful for investors. Okay, preferred stock. Most of the conversation today will be on preferred stock. When an investor gets preferred stock, they get equity straight away. They get the preferred stock. They get a unit of equity in that investment. So there's nothing convertible happening at that particular time. You're just getting preferred stock. In the preferred stock round, you get comprehensive investor rights, unlike in safes and sometimes with convertible notes. Often a preferred stock investor will ask for a board seat. They'll ask for specific governance rights over your company. Preferred stock rounds are much more heavily negotiated than safes and usually con notes rounds. More negotiations means higher legal fees, usually significantly higher legal fees for a preferred stock round. So for that reason, usually by the time companies hold off on doing preferred stock until they're ready for their Series A round. Sometimes companies do a preferred stock round before the Series A. They'll call that the preferred stock Series Seed, not C, but seed round. So sometimes that happens, but yeah, usually you want to hold off the preferred stock and just raise on safes for as long as you can. All right, I will skip along. Now, this slide is about just the general terms you want to include in all term sheets. So, and just to step back for a little bit, term sheets, the term sheet is the document you sign at the start of a financing round. It's not the definitive agreement for that round, for that investment. It's just a sort of overview of what this financing round is going to include, and the parties agree that up front in a term sheet. Now, you want to make sure in that term sheet that you have proper company names, the parties' names are correct, company's names correct, investors' names correct. You're using the legal entity names. I know it sounds basic, but this gets messed up all the time. So just make sure you have that correct for starters. Make sure the term sheet is dated. The term sheet is going to include mostly non-binding provisions. The binding provisions for the investment will come later in the definitive agreements, but you'll just agree up front what that's going to look like in a sort of non-binding way in the term sheet. Some of the provisions in the term sheet will be binding, and those provisions will be legally enforceable. The binding provisions in a term sheet usually cover confidentiality, exclusivity, and governing law, like which state's laws is going to govern the financing round. For confidentiality, you want to be careful as a founder to not tie yourself up to a particularly onerous confidentiality provision at the term sheet stage, because you may still be going out to other investors that you want to add to the round. So usually the parties will agree that you're not going to discuss the terms of the deal publicly until definitive documents are signed, and maybe not even after then as well. But there'll be a degree of confidentiality during the negotiations phase. And then yeah, but like I said, you want to be sure that you're free to still go out to other investors to the extent you need to fill out the round. And similarly with the exclusivity provision, lead investors will often ask for some level of exclusivity in the term sheet. They don't want to come in and start working on the deal, spending money on lawyers and other people for their due diligence, other advisors that will assist in their due diligence, if you're still going to go out and find another lead investor. So it can be reasonable for a lead investor to ask for some level of exclusivity around their piece of the transaction. Again, you want to be careful, though, that you're not tied up, for a really long time. You don't want to be in exclusivity with someone for ages. They're either going to close the deal or they're not. You also don't want to be in a situation where you can't go and speak to other investors to fill out the round. So that's just a couple of things to keep in mind while you're dealing with those provisions that typically are binding. One other kind of generic term is the legal fee coverage. Often investors will ask for legal fee coverage for this specific investment, and that can be arranged depending on what their participation in the deal is. So you can think about whether you, as a founder, whether you're willing to accept that or not. It's fairly common to accept it, but okay. All right, I'm gonna turn. Well, I guess should I check the chat to see if there's any questions? Oh, this is the tech lawyer who's not tech savvy. Okay. All right, someone shout out to me if there's a question in the chat. Otherwise, I'll keep powering on. All right, this next section is about safes. Now, I will say to you, most people do not bother with the term sheet for a safe financing round, but sometimes they do. So that's why I'm talking about it here. But often, you know, um, especially here in the Bay Area, people are very comfortable with the Y Combinator forms of safes. And you can get those forms off the Y Combinator website. Uh, there's a handful of different forms of safes that the Y Combinator folks have developed, and they update them all, every couple of years. So usually if you're going to do a safe with someone, you just go straight to those forms, and you might negotiate some additional terms based on those forms, and not necessarily have a term sheet. That said, sometimes there is a term sheet, particularly if you're doing a larger round, and there's going to be, say, a lead safe investor. There's not really a lead investor in safe rounds like there is for preferred stock rounds, but if there's a particular investor who's going to, say you're doing a safe financing, you want to raise 5 million, and there's a particular investor who's going to put in 3 million of that. They may want to have a term sheet that sort of sets out their specific terms that they're getting for putting more money in, or maybe not. Anyway, I'll stop rambling on this point. But just know you don't necessarily need a term sheet for safe financing. That said, okay, the main forms of Y Combinator safes. There's the valuation cap safe, there's the discount rate safe, and the most favored nation safe. The MFN safe is rarely used, but no, it's available. And then Y Combinator also provides a pro rata rights side letter that you may or may not want to offer your investors. The valuation cap, in my experience, is the most common by far. A lot of investors are very comfortable with this form of safe. And what it means is that when you're filling out this safe, or when you're completing it, the thing you want to focus on is, what is the valuation of my company at this moment? It's usually negotiated with the investor. How much will the investor be putting in? What's their investment amount? And obviously, who is the investor? That's really all you need to focus on if you're just going to go with the Y Combinator form for the valuation cap. And oh, I see we've something in the chat. Just quickly take a look. What is a typical cap for a safe? Right. So for an early stage safe, it's not uncommon to have a really low valuation cap. Sometimes I see as low as 2 million, sometimes as high as 25 million. It's really a range. I'd say 5 million is pretty typical if you're coming in, early at an early stage company, but it really depends, and that's something you'll negotiate with the investor, and they'll look at things like what your revenue is, and how valuable your IP is. Quite frankly, who the founders are, what's their sort of track rate, all the things they'll look at to assess the value of your company. Um, Potential revenue being a big indicator. And one thing to keep in mind, a nice sort of thing about the valuation cap, is you can get a sense of how much equity you're giving away in your company with the valuation cap. So say you have uh, say you have a safe and the valuation cap is 5 million, and you've got an investor coming in for 1 million. Well, then you've just given away potentially 20% of your company. So that's, you can do the calculations fairly easy with the valuation cap method. That's a real benefit for it. Okay, typical valuation for first angel investor. Yeah, so for angel investors, if you're coming in with a big check, then usually you can have a big say or dictate the valuation that's going to be agreed with the company. Usually, though, most investors sort of follow perhaps a larger institutional investor, and they'll usually, if they're coming in around the same time, if they're doing the safe at the same time as, say, a large institutional investor, it's usually the larger investor will set the valuation with the company. But for early stage companies, it's really a range. Sometimes it can be very low. Sometimes it can be up to 25 million. There's really no set cap. It's just what's agreed. And just for the founders to keep in mind, you got to be careful how much of your equity you give away with safes. Okay, I'll quickly talk about discount rate safes. So this would be the second most common type of safe that's used. And what it means is that the investor will get a discount on the price in the preferred stock round. So when the safe converts to preferred stock in the next preferred stock equity financing, that safe holder will get a discounted price, 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever the negotiated discount is. 20% is pretty common. Sometimes an investor will ask for a combined safe. They want a safe that includes a valuation cap and a discount rate. And whichever price gets them the best price for conversion is the price they'll go with. If you have an investor who's asking for that, reach out to me. There's not a set, or whoever your attorney is, but feel free to reach out to me. There's not a set Y Combinator form for the combined safe at the moment. They have historically had them, but the present set doesn't include that. So you'll need someone to help you draft it. I see we've got a question. Let me have a look. I have heard that stacking is not necessarily found for it. That's correct. I'll just read the question. I have heard that stacking multiple safes is not necessarily founder friendly, all coming from founder pool upon conversion. Would be curious to yes, that is correct. So with safes, you've got to be really careful that you don't give away too much of the equity of the company up front, especially if you're agreeing to low valuations. So that's just, and it does come, so when the company is incorporated, typically the founders own everything up front. They own all the common stock up front. Every investor you bring in is chipping away at the founders' holdings. So, that this applies to any equity financings, but with safes, people can get tripped up because, you're entering into the safe. it's not like immediately apparent the impact it'll have on the cap table unless you're really thinking about it. So you got to think about it so you don't give away too much of your company up front. Okay. I'll quickly now talk about a not commonly used form of SAFE. It's called the most favored nation SAFE. And what this SAFE means is whichever investor gets an MFN SAFE, they'll just get whatever the best terms are at the time of conversion. So say you've got 5 SAFEs out there, these people come in and usually if people use these, it's just before a preferred stock round. And they'll say, we'll come in, we'll give you this amount of money, and we will convert at the best terms you're offering in the next preferred stock round. So that's how that works. Pro rata rights is another thing to think about. I just mention it here because if you're going to use the Y Combinator forms, they also include a form of side letter for pro rata rights. And the Y Combinator form of pro rata rights means that the investor who has that side letter will get their pro rata right to participate in the next preferred stock round only. So the round that their SAFE converts, they'll have the right to participate in the new money for their pro rata portion. And typically you just want to limit giving pro rata rights to major investors. Sometimes you have to give it to everyone depending on, how much sway you have. But yeah, typically you give the pro rata rights just to the major investors. Okay, moving along. Okay. Some additional terms to think about with SAFEs. Now, these are terms that are not in the Y Combinator form. These are additional terms that investors sometimes ask for. Oh, I'll just quickly check this questions here. You need previous pro rata investors to sign up on the next investment. Yes. So typically how that works, if someone has pro rata rights, they don't need to, well, because they have pro rata rights, they aren't necessarily needed, their approval is not necessarily needed to sign off on the next round. But if you have pro rata rights, you typically are a major investor and you'll have other major investor rights, which can include certain provisions that will require your approval or at least the preferred stock, or depending on the terms of the particular investment series, will need their approval to sign off on the future financings. And I talk about that more later on in the presentation as well. Okay, can you expand on the sunset provisions for the MFN? Yes, so sometimes if you enter into one of these MFN SAFEs, you might say to the investor, look, that's okay, but you just have this right for like a year or something like that. Or you'll come up with, if we do another SAFE financing, you'll get the MFN at that point and then it falls away. So I guess that what I'm trying to say is the sunset provision for an MFN can be time-based, it could be event-based, but you agree to the MFN as a founder, but you say it's not going to last forever. Okay, it's just lasting until this point, and then you've got to lock in your terms. Okay. Going back to the additional investor terms. All right, so the first one that often gets asked for is a qualified financing threshold. And what this means is that your SAFE, the investor's SAFE, cannot automatically convert in a preferred stock round unless that preferred stock round meets certain thresholds. And usually it's a monetary threshold. So it'll say something like, this SAFE will automatically convert in any preferred stock financing round where you raise more than $5 million, something like that. If it's a round that's less than $5 million, you got to get the investor consent to convert the SAFE. So it's that sort of mechanism. And all these types of terms, if investors ask for them, obviously you want to work with your lawyer on it, but it's a matter of how you feel whether you need to accept these terms or not. Major investor rights. I touched on this a little bit just now, but some investors coming in early on the safe, they'll say, okay, we're fine with using safes. We're not going to force you to do a preferred stock round at this point, but we want to have the major investor rights when this safe converts. And we want you to agree now up front that we're going to get those major investor rights upon conversion. And so the major investor rights, it's the pro rata rights, it's information rights, inspection rights, and it's the ROFA over share transfers for founders. So a right of first refusal over the founders' future share transfers. And we'll discuss that more later on, but just know that's what they're looking for major investor rights. MFN, we touched on it above. Again, it can come up. It's very common to ask for an MFN in conjunction with, say, the discount safe or the post-money cap safe, valuation cap safe. And it means very similar to what we discussed above. There's a clause included that says, okay, we're agreeing these terms now, but if you bring in another investor who gets better terms before my safe converts, I want to get those terms too. And so that's what that means, or variations of that concept. It's very common for investors to ask for information rights, even at the safe level. Investors need information for monitoring their portfolio, portfolio companies. So it's pretty common for them to ask for a standard slate of information rights for whatever information they need to monitor their, to keep up with their internal reporting at a minimum. We talked about pro rata rights above. Just know that there's the pro rata rights YC style of side letter, and then there's just general pro rata rights. So the YC standard side letter, that just gives the investor pro rata rights over the next preferred stock financing round only. So their safe converts, they get the right to participate in the new money for that conversion round. So they maintain their shareholding percentage, and then that's it. Their pro rata rights falls away. That's the YC standard. It's very common for investors to ask for an expanded version of pro rata rights, and that means pro rata rights over all your future financing rounds. So your Series A, B, C, they want it over all of them. They want to have pro rata rights forever and ever. And that obviously rarely happens, but sometimes people ask for that up front and then it'll fall away in later rounds, which are often dictated by the lead investor in those new rounds. Okay, I think we have a question up here. Let's have a look. Can you elaborate on information rights? What types of information rights? Monthly financial statements. Yes. Okay, so information rights usually cover quarterly and annual financial statements. They'll cover the cap table and changes to the cap table. They might cover, some sort of requirement to produce an annual report or not. They often include the requirement to share the budget, the company's annual budget, with the investor. And sometimes they include like a generic right for the investor to reach out and ask for reasonable information. And there's fairly well established market standards on what that looks like. Okay, I think I missed a question here. Okay, giving board seats can be avoided during safes. Yes, it's pretty rare for an investor to ask for a board seat during a safe financing. That said, it does happen sometimes. And look, sometimes it can be helpful. If you've got a really strategic investor coming in who knows a lot about your industry, your company, can introduce you to customers or help you find a co-founder or what have you, it could be helpful. It could also be a giant pain in the butt. So it's sort of on a case-by-case basis. Usually when you're doing safes in pre-seed, you want to keep your board small just to the founders or even just one founder. And don't give away the board seats unless you have to or unless it would be helpful. Which one is more founder friendly, safe with valuation cap or discount? Great question, Andreas. And it's a little hard to say up front, but usually the discount is considered more founder friendly. And the reason why is an investor's coming in early, they might get a really low valuation cap. It might be 2 million, it might be 5 million, and that's a low valuation cap. Potentially you're giving away a big chunk of your company with a low valuation cap. And what that means is if you've got a low valuation cap, and later, hopefully, your company's valuation has increased. So when you get to your actual preferred stock round where the safes are going to convert, hopefully your valuation cap is, north of 20 million when you're thinking about your first preferred stock round or higher. So it's a great deal for the investors. They came in early, they get that low cap, they'll get the price worked out. Their price will be worked out of that lower cap. The discount rate will be matched at the price at the time. So in our scenario here, say the valuation cap at the time of the Series A is 25 million, they'll get the discount off 25 million. So they'll get a higher price. And when you have a higher price, you convert for less stock. So the investors want the lowest price, they want the cheapest price for their stock they can get. Often with the valuation cap, they do get the lower price. Now, that doesn't always pan out. So there can be scenarios where, the discount would get a better price. And sometimes investors ask for a combined safe for that reason. But yeah, that's sort of the calculation. You can think about, well, honestly, it's usually the investors who set the terms on whether they're going to have a valuation cap or a discount. Not always, certainly not always, but just, they usually have an idea of what they want to invest, the terms they want to invest on. But yeah, okay, good. Glad that helped. All right, moving on. Okay, I'm going to talk about preferred stock now. So when it comes to term sheets, you'll mostly use term sheets for preferred stock rounds. The first things you want to cover in your term sheet is you want to be clear about what the total amount of the round is, the valuation of your company at the preferred stock time you're doing the preferred stock, and who the lead investor is, and the amount the lead investor is putting in. How much of the total round is the lead investor going to put in? That's the things you want to clear up straight away. Now, some other key terms that are economic terms that you're going to need to think about. Liquidation preference. I always steer people towards the 1x non-participating. And that means that the investors, when it comes time for a liquidation event, whether it be, dissolution of the company, a sad scenario, or M&A exit, the investors are either going to get back their 1x of their investment, or they're going to convert to common, and all the investors will get an amount that correlates to their shareholding percentage. That's what the non-participating means. You want to stay away from participating. Participating means that the investors get their 1x cut off the top before there's any other flow through in the preference. So just focus on the 1x non-participating. That's market, and that's what you want to get. And I should just also step back, sorry, to say that the preferred stock is usually based on the NVCA forms. There is like an agreed set of documents that most venture lawyers use, and it's from the NVCA, the National Venture Capital Association. And there's 5 documents in that package, and that's what gets negotiated during a preferred stock round. Some people, there is an alternative package of documents called the Series Seed forms, and they only include 2 documents, a little bit more straightforward. If you're doing, say, a preferred stock Series Seed round, they might be a good option for that. But usually folks just go with the NVCA forms. Venture lawyers across America are very comfortable with these forms, and even though they look very complex and difficult to non-legal eyes, I guess. Venture lawyers are very familiar with them and know how they work and interrelate, and it's usually just easier to use those forms and in turn save you on legal fees. Oh, sorry, I'll go back. I see I've got a question up here. Okay, question on cap table. As early stage founders, there are folks in team advisors where we have verbal agreements and not assigned equity. Is it expected to have a fully ready cap table with Carter? Yes, please do that. Please, before you do any financing, I would say even before a safe round, but definitely before your preferred stock round, get your cap table in order. It is essential. It is legally required. In the US, we don't have all sorts of requirements where you need to register your stock with, various governments and so on, government agencies and things. But the flip side is that the companies are required to internally maintain their compliance with securities laws. To that end, you have to have an accurate cap table. Your cap table has to list out everyone has common stock. It's got to list out your stock option pool, and it's got to list out grants from that stock option pool. To the extent you have promised options, I mean, I get it. You can't always process those quickly, but to the extent you can, get them done as quickly as possible. There's a number of reasons for that, but valuation being one. You want to issue the equity to your employees while the valuation's low so they get the better deal and they'll be happier. But you don't want to have a whole bunch of promised equity out there not being dealt with. And when you go to do your preferred stock round, this is one of the key parts of the diligence. The investors' lawyers will really drill into the cap table, and you're going to have documentation to show it, to back up every entry on your cap table. So thanks for raising that question. It's a really important part of preparing for a preferred stock round. But any round, I would say, just because it is really essential that you have that accurate. Yes, I can dig up the NVCA link. And if I forget to do it while I'm doing this presentation, just reach out to me later and I'll send it to you. And I can send you the YC ones as well. Okay. Yes, so on the cap table, I would recommend, on the use Carter, or I think Fidelity is going to start offering a free service, or you know, Pulley, whoever, or you can do it yourself. When I'm doing it for clients, I, just use an Excel spreadsheet, and on the first page, I list out all the stock, common stock, preferred stock. I'll have another page for options, and then I'll have another page for safes and con notes. And you just list everything out, and you make sure you've got documents to back up every entry. You're correct. You don't necessarily have to list the safes in your cap table, but I would recommend you do. Just so you keep track of everything. It's all in one nice cap table, and it makes it much easier for investors coming in to do due diligence on your past financings. For pre-seed, what are the standard forms we should consider according to NVCA? So if you're doing pre-seed, I would say stay away from the NVCA docs and just try and focus on safes. If you have to do if you have an investor who's insisting on doing a full preferred stock financings, consider if the Series Seed forms will work. And if you have to do an NVCA slate of documents, then you have to do it if that's what the investor's insisting on and you can't get them to budge. So, yeah, like I said, I'll try and remember to send around the link to the NVCA docs. Otherwise, email me and I'll send you the link later. Is it common to have Series A and Series B and then issue new stocks? Yes. As you go through your rounds, your equity financing rounds, you'll make amendments to what is your stock option pool. You'll increase that to incorporate new hires and so on. Every now and then, you'll do an additional common stock hiring that might be necessary for that specific deal, but that's really on a specific company by company basis. But it is very common to increase the stock option pool with each round. All right, jumping back to the presentation. Loving all these questions. Thanks, guys. It's really helpful to know what you guys are thinking about. All right, so liquidation preference, you want to go for the 1x non-participating. Dividends, when it comes to the term sheet stage, try and just have, from a founder's perspective, just the vanilla clause about dividends, which just says the preferred stockholders will get a dividend if the board declares it for the common stockholders. That's the best for the founders. Sometimes investors will insist upon a set dividend rate and that it be cumulative. You often can't avoid it, but like if you can avoid it, avoid that from the company's perspective. Anti-dilution, very common at the preferred stock round to agree to give investors anti-dilution rights. And what that means is that if you do a down round, the investor, their stock will be topped up so they're able to maintain their shareholding percentage. So they are not diluted. Now, to that, you want to have the narrow base weighted average anti-dilution rights and not the full ratchet. It's kind of legal easy, and the difference is very legal easy. So just make sure in the term sheet that you ask for narrow base weighted. Okay, I think we've got some questions here. For the first angel investor at 10K, what is a typical valuation? Is it possible to defer valuation till seed? Yes, you can defer your valuation and go with the discount rate if that's what you want to do. That can be a good and sort of elegant solution for everyone. If you take in a 10K investor and that's your first investor, it's usually when it's really is a conversation between the investor and the company to work out their valuation. Usually, just looking at across the market, it's your valuation would be less than 5 million at that stage, but it really is on a company by company basis. But yeah, or go with the discount. Maybe agree like a 20 or 30% discount upfront as sort of a way to offset that. Okay, can you explain participating versus soon participating? I'm not sure what you mean by soon participating, but participating versus non-participating is probably a typo here, I'm guessing. Yeah, this is a pretty complex question. I'll try and answer it simply here. And if I don't answer your question here, Vibhu, feel free to ping me later and I'll go over it some more. But just basically, the non-participating means when there is when an exit event occurs, the investor will either get the greater of their 1x investment back, or they'll convert to common stock along with all the common holders and they'll get their shareholding percentage, whatever would be the greater amount. Whereas with participating preferred, the investors are going to get their participating multiple back before any other calculations are done. And that could be a 1x, it could be a 2x, whatever is agreed. The investors will take that off the top first before there's any consideration of whether it should be converted or not. Okay. Hopefully that answered it, but feel free to email me later if it doesn't. Okay. Skipping along. All right. I'll just quickly do a time check here. All right, I've got 10 minutes. I'll keep talking for a bit longer, but if people need to drop, that's fine, obviously. Preferred stock control terms. Okay, so at the preferred stock round, investors will start asking for board seats. They will be given protective provisions. And what that means is there's a long list of things that the company may want to do that the preferred stock will want to have a vote as to whether the company can do that or not. As a founder, you want to try and keep that list short and just to sort of key items early on, just so you don't have to go back to the investors all the time when you want to do stuff. You might want to limit it to, changes to the charter documents, future preferred stock rounds, and M&A events, things like that. anyway, just know that there is a long list of these types of protective provisions that come up in preferred stock rounds, whether they're for the directors, if you have a preferred director appointed, or the preferred stock, they each have protective provisions that will require their approval for the company to do those things. Information rights we touched on before. At the preferred stock round, investors will also start looking for things like an observer right. So different from a board seat, they might ask for a board observer who can attend the meetings but can't vote, but they can keep up to date with what the company's doing by attending the board meetings. Inspection rights is another thing. The investor will have the right to come in and take a look, come into the company's offices and have a look at the company's books and records. They may also ask for what's called a management rights letter. And this letter gives very broad information rights, inspection rights, and also, most importantly, gives the investor the right to connect with management, to essentially require the management to meet with them, once a quarter or so on, to discuss the company. And I would just say on that, to that end, to the extent you can, try and keep the information rights uniform across your investors, and usually you can do this with the information rights piece, just so you're not preparing different packages for different investors. You're just preparing one package of information rights and sending that out to the investors who have information rights. Okay. No other questions? Okay. Marianne's put, sorry, yeah, Marianne's put some really helpful notes, follow-up notes there. So take a look in the chat for those. Okay. Voting agreements. So a few extra clauses you want to think about when it comes to sort of control issues, the drag along, and you're obviously in the definitive documents, you'll go into much more detail, but is there going to be a drag along, and what will be the key triggers of that? The right of first refusal on founders' transfers. So in the future, when the founders go to try and sell some stock or transfer stock to people, what is the restrictions around that? And there is very commonly a right of first refusal, first for the company, and then secondly for the preferred stock investors. And you want to include, just in the term sheet, you just want to have any, clear language about what the triggers are for these types of things, just so it's that makes the drafting of the definitive documents more straightforward. Right. What are the most common mistakes you've seen inexperienced founders make? Yeah. So honestly, probably the one that happens a fair bit is giving too much of the company away with their safes early on, and then also signing the term sheet without having a lawyer look over it. Like they're so excited to get a term sheet from an investor, they just sign it because they're worried the investor will go away, and then they share it with their lawyer, and then you see that they've perhaps signed up to a bunch of things that they didn't need to sign up to. Do early safe investors get information? Not usually. It's not included in the YC safe, I think. It might be somewhere there in the weeds, but it's usually if you're doing a safe investment, and you're working with an institutional investor, they will sometimes ask for separate information rights, and they'll have a side letter, so it's all very sort of simple and packaged. That's not uncommon, but otherwise it's not in the standard safe documents. So, okay, moving along. I'll just quickly run through here. Here's some other things to think about. Registration rights, usually at an early stage, you just agree to the form in the NVCA, which covers these standard items here. Transfer restrictions, we touched on this a little bit, the restrictions around founder share transfers. In the same document that captures the ROFA, there's also what's called the co-sale rights. So if down the road, when the founder goes to sell some shares, and if the investors choose not to buy those shares from the founder, they can elect to use their co-sale rights. So they can force the founder to include a portion of their stock in the founder's sale. So it's a co-sale along with the founders. And if you're a founder, you want to be looking for some carve-outs in this agreement, or carve-outs of these rights. And it's very common to agree to that for estate planning, and somewhat common to agree to allow the founders to have a small amount exempt from these rights, so they can have a little bit of easy liquidity if they need it. Just so the founders need to get a little bit of money while they're working along. Sometimes the investors will agree that the investors can sell a small portion of their stock, not subject to these terms. We touched along drag-alongs. This is the liquidity comes in again with the exits. The definition of deemed liquidation event, that can be something important that's set out in the term sheet. And if you're dealing with non-US investors, just know sometimes non-US investors want to invest in US companies or what have you. They may ask for some sort of non-standard US rights. And commonly I see tag-along rights and redemption rights come up in this category. Okay, I'm going to look up at the questions here again. Yes, IP. What about IP patents, codes, investors? So this is actually, I do another presentation on this, how to get due diligence ready for your financing round. And this is one part of it. So when you're getting your company ready for a financing round, you've got to have the cap table in order. You also got to have your IP in order. Uh, if you have patents or you're looking to submit for a patent, that's something that's important. What is most important for early stage companies is that you have everyone on the team sign what is called a PIIAA, a proprietary information and invention assignment agreement, or a confidential information and invention assignment agreement. You want to make sure everybody working on your team has assigned their IP rights to the company. So that's the main thing you want to focus on for the IP when you're getting due diligence ready for your financing round. What are some rights founders should be careful about when selling a company? Okay, well, that is a whole other presentation. And please just feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to talk through that at length. But at a high level, um, when you're selling a company and you're a venture-backed company, you do have to take your investors into account, and you will need the investors' approval, or at least a majority of the investors to approve your transaction. So, it starts early on, that investor relations, and partnering with the right investors who are going to help you when it comes time to do that exit. And I have a couple of slides here to finish off, which touch on, that a lot on investor relations. So when you're going in to negotiate your term sheet, have a sense of what sort of leverage you have and your timing. Like, when are you going to absolutely have to have this money by? Give yourself plenty of time so you're not rushing and about to run out of money and all that sort of thing. Understand what the market standards are for your stage. Are you pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B? Understand where you are and what your sort of general goalposts are. There's like no firm rules, but market standards do sort of govern the venture startups space. If you can, get multiple term sheets. Try and get feedback from it, or potential transactions from as many investors as you can. It's really important that you build the relationships before you go out to get the money. Marianne's group here, Founders Bay, so helpful with this. If you have a particular investor in mind for your startup, or if you're an investor and you have particular startups that you're interested in, go to networking events, try and connect with people. It really is the best way to do it. I know you can do cold intros over LinkedIn or what have you, and maybe you have a friend who knows an investor or something like that. But going to events, meeting investors in person, establishing that just face-to-face intro before you go and submit your pitch to them can be really helpful and can sort of put you on the top of the pile. Because as you can imagine, a lot of investors just they get so many requests that it's really hard for them to go through them all. Have your legal counsel review everything, bring them in before you sign a term sheet. Yeah, just work with your legal counsel and their expertise to get you through these financings. During the negotiations, whether you're negotiating the term sheet or you've now moved on to negotiating the definitive documents, I think these comments still stand. Focus on what's most important to you. Don't drill down into every point. Try and understand where the investor's coming from. The investor may know a lot about your business, or they may know very little about it. But either way, they know that they're taking a risk, putting their money into you, and they can only take so many risks, and they need some of those risks to pay off. So, understand if the investors are seeming nervous, that's where that's coming from. Be sure to document all verbal agreements. Often founders and investors can have great conversations, lots of things are agreed, and then it doesn't make its way into the term sheet. And then you're sort of scrambling later to be like, oh, what did we discuss? What did we really agree? Try and get all that in the term sheet up front, and then it can be reflected in the definitive documents that will sign and enforce the investment. Set clear timelines and deadlines. You don't want to be doing the financing forever and ever. After after the signing, I mean, this is more sort of after the closing of the round as a whole. Stay in touch with your investors. They're the best champions for your company. They're the ones who, your interests are aligned. You all want to increase the value of the company. If you've given information rights to your investors, try and honor them the best you can. Start planning for your future rounds. Know when you're going to, know your budget, know when you've raised some money, know what you're going to spend it on, and when you're going to run out and when you need to raise. So you're giving yourself plenty of time. All right. And yes, keep a detailed cap table. That's very important. Update it after every round. My last few comments here, and then I'll check the questions. Term sheets are non-binding, but the parties do usually stick to what they agreed in the term sheet up front while they're negotiating definitive documents. So just keep that in mind. It is important what you put in the term sheet, even if it is non-binding. Remember, the second one, the best term sheet is from an investor who adds strategic value to your company beyond the capital. If you can partner with investors who can bring you customers, can introduce you to a co-founder or other team members, an investor who's got a wide network of potentially other investors, just be thinking about that with investors if you can. Not everyone can. Sometimes you just got to take the investors you can get, but that's a good approach if you can do it. And also just remember when you're doing preferred stock rounds, that first package of documents will sort of set the groundwork for all the rounds going forward. If you do a Series Seed preferred stock round, that will be used for your Series A, and that will be used for your Series B, and so on. So it is important what you agree up front, even though you're an early stage company, and you might be scrambling to get those investors. Just remember, it is important that you have a solid set of documents for your first preferred stock round.